Hello everybody. Today we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to show you how to put together a lockdown video for a band, sort of a Zoom style video, but with no latency, much higher quality audio, no glitchiness. It's a way that your band can work together and get that kind of feel good, we're doing something together community vibe that we really miss from not being able to play on stage together. Most of the Zoom videos that look like that are not actually made in Zoom or Google Chat or any of those types of platforms, because there's a thing called latency. And so when you're dealing with digital, the sound that comes from this microphone is an analog electronic signal that is amplified and then converted to digital. And then on the other end, it has to be converted back to analog. And that process creates latency. It's just the physics of how it works. There's a tiny bit of lag. Now, when you try to do that over the internet, you get much more lag. It's generally a third of a second. And that's just too much for band members to play together. My band tried it. It didn't work out. It was frustrating. You'll see some choral music where people try to do it. But I'm going to show you another method that I used for a band that I work with called Antsy McClain and the Park Troubadours. And I play with that band when Antsy's on the West Coast. And so a bunch of members that are all over the place, Nashville, Arizona, California, we all got footage together and created this video. And so I'm going to show you the process of making the video for Antsy McClain, We Lost Mama in a Pothole. Let's go. I use Magix Vegas to do my video editing. You could use Final Cut Pro, you could use Premiere. DaVinci, I think, is another one you could use. As long as the video program allows layering, so you can stack multiple videos and you can reframe size the videos within that, you'll be able to use that program. So it's a little different for each program. There are a few steps involved in making a lockdown video like this. One, you're going to instigate an email with the band and present them with the idea. Kind of hash it around, maybe make them think like it's their own idea, and then get everybody on board with doing it. You'll have different people as musicians who are quite technically savvy. In Antsy's band, we have 3 or 4 audio engineers. We have different people that work in the music industry. We have guys that are incredible at graphics. Everybody has a strength, and so we kind of pooled those strengths together, and then we pulled along the guys that we have some incredible musicians, but they're not tech savvy, and that's fine. So we bring them along, showing them, guiding them through the process, getting the best footage out of them that we can. There's a fuzzy. 2, the band leader or somebody that is capable of doing a guide track is going to make a guide track to the song. It probably could be done to a click track, but if that's not your thing, you don't have to. And that's going to be the chord progression of the song and a primary vocal. In our case, Antsy did that. He wrote the song and he presented me with acoustic guitar and vocal. Sounded great. Shared it in the email thread with all the guys. They were able to download that and then play to it. The next phase is each person records their film footage and their audio footage. Some guys do it at the same time. Some guys do the audio portion into a digital audio workstation, a DAW, and then do the look afterwards. I mean, we weren't worried about the fact that we're lip syncing. It's already not live. It's just impossible to do a live Zoom with a band. It's 300 millisecond delay. You can't get a groove on. Musicians groove down to about a couple thousandths of a second. From my synchronization of drums and bass, I can see musicians are playing down to the thousandths of a second. We're nowhere near that with the technology. So a lot of times people are watching these videos, they don't realize they did not happen live, and a video editor puts all that together, and an audio editor, maybe the same guy, maybe not, edits all the audio. So the guys capture the footage, that's the next step. Then they send that to me over the cloud. We'll go over the steps to do that. I download that footage. I put that into folders related to the project, assets folders of all the different bits. Then I put those into Vegas, into the timeline. I start to edit that all together, synchronize all of that using the camera audio. Then I take all the audio and I load that into a DAW. I load that into Pro Tools. And I work on that in Pro Tools where I can really sweeten the audio and get a studio mix going on with the bits the guys have given me. It sounds way better than editing the audio in the video audio workstation, which does a decent job, but it's partly my comfort with Pro Tools and my ability to navigate the program quickly and get the sound results that I want. When I export that as a WAV file, I load that back into Vegas, and at that point, once all the video tracks are synchronized, I can mute all the audio tracks except for the new final mix, and then that is rendered out with the video to an MP4 format, either 4K or 1080p, and then from there, it's uploaded to YouTube, or in this case, I sent that to Antsy over the cloud, and then he was able to upload that directly to YouTube, to his YouTube channel. And so you can watch the video on his YouTube channel. I'm not going to play a lot of it here because I don't want a content violation, and I'm just showing you the method for doing this for your band. Now, in the case of Antsy, he's an Americana artist. He's very lighthearted. Some of it's humor related. This song is somewhat satirical. So the style that we wanted to have it like Zoom, but less clinical, kind of fun. So we did some different backgrounds. Each guy kind of did their own thing. The real trick here is to get a kick-ass guide track to start with and then have everybody play to that. So everybody's going to download the MP3 or maybe just play it back on their phone. You'll see, like in myself and the drummer, a few of the guys, they're wearing headphones. So what we're doing is we're playing back because we're recording into mics at the same time. I don't want to hear the audio coming back from Antsy, so I'm using headphones just like I would to do an overdub in the studio. So for us techie guys, that's how we're doing it. We're listening on headphones to the previous mix, and then we're recording alongside of that. And in some of our cases, we're recording video and audio into two separate devices, such as a DAW, like Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, GarageBand. Reaper is a good free DAW to record with. So for the guys that were recording into the DAW, they recorded and then they sent me that audio by exporting out of their DAW and then uploading it either to Google Drive, Dropbox, iCloud, or my favorite, WeTransfer.com. Now what I like about WeTransfer.com is you can send a 2 gigabyte file. It's posted for a week. You enter the recipient's email, you enter your email, and then you drag and drop the file. And as long as it's less than 2 gigs, it'll send to that person. And then each email is notified that the file has been transferred. And then the sender gets another email when the recipient has downloaded. So WeTransfer is a good way to go if you don't want to set up an iCloud or Dropbox, sharing permissions, Google. I had to walk a couple of the musicians through the permissions thing with Google and Dropbox. Sometimes if you share a Dropbox file with another Dropbox user and their Dropbox is just about full, they won't be able to download it unless you copy the link and send them the link. The guys are playing the music, the basic track. They're going to send me that file, and they're also going to send me their video file. And so if they're using a camera, like with an SD card, they're going to take that SD card out and they're going to transfer it to their computer and then upload it. In the case of using an iPhone, it's a lot simpler. You can just upload it through iCloud, or you can use a cord, attach it to your computer, download it to your desktop, and then use the WeTransfer. Each person is now going to send me a video file and 1 or 2 audio files. So in the case of Todd, Hot Rod Todd, the bass player, he's sending me a vocal track and he's sending me a bass guitar track. In the case of the keyboard player, he sent me a vocal track and a keyboard track. And I really prefer that because then I was able to take their vocals and mix them appropriately, blend them to taste. The drummer, Spoons, he sang, but he sang with the snare drum, and it was really hard to get the blend right. And I ended up actually just editing his vocals out of the take. Sorry, Spoons. But it sounds really good the way it came out. So, you know, that's the way it goes. It's all about the best sounding song. So some of the guys, they've got good audio recording. Maybe they have a crummy camera. They can use the phone and then just upload that phone footage to me. You'll notice in our footage, our guitar players do not have their necks showing except for Hot Rod Todd. And I would suggest trying to frame in the fretted players so that you can see their fingers. A lot of times we like to have the headstock in for video. There's a sort of unwritten rule that you never cut off the headstock when you're filming or taking a picture of a guitar player. But in this case, the frames are pretty small, so we're going to make an exception there, and we're going to cut off the headstocks. But I wish their fingers were in there because Rick's a virtuoso, and he's doing these slide parts that are incredible, and you can't actually see him doing it. What Antsy did after he sent me the guide track is then he just went in and made his own funny video and his own background to it. And so that's what we have in the middle. Ironically, Antsy sent me a format called 4:3. And that's the aspect ratio of the video. And you'll see this is what we call a 16:9 format. It's a widescreen format, which is what everything from 720 on up is. Pretty much if you look at any TV from the 90s, early 2000s, it's 4:3. Then we went to widescreen. So everybody's going to send widescreen almost by default because that's what everything is shot at now. But for whatever reason, after Antsy processed this, it came out 4:3. But it kind of worked. I made his frame a little bigger. I like the notion of making the frames look a little funky just because that fits the vibe of this band. One thing I would recommend not doing is shooting vertically. And so Bruce shot vertically, and it was a great shot if I wanted to put him vertically in the entire frame. So what I did with Bruce is I had to reorientate his frame and then kind of crop it, put a background in the sides, and then re-render that in 1080p. You're going to want to treat each video individually and get the color right and the light balance right before you do the multi-camera version because it's going to use a lot of processing power. In my case, I shot with a green screen behind me, and I have the triangle and the shaker. I kind of waited for the other guys to see what their colors and backgrounds were going to look like, and then I added my background to taste. So once I had my background done and my color the way I wanted it, I rendered out my clip at 1080p. When I'm getting the footage back from the guys, I'm going to really have 2, 3, or 4 bits of footage from each guy. You're going to have the camera footage with the camera mic. And most of the camera mics we're not going to use unless the guys didn't have any other way to record their part. And then we're going to use the camera mic. And I'll give you some tips on recording with camera mic in a little bit. We're going to have audio that they recorded into their digital audio workstation or their other recorder. You could record it into a portable Tascam recorder, Zoom style recorder, SD recorder. So in the case of Hot Rod Todd, I have camera footage with the camera audio footage, which I'm not going to use for the video, but I'm going to use it to synchronize the footage. And then I'm going to have his bass track and I'm going to have his vocal track. So I have 4 tracks. I'm going to put those all into Vegas and put them on the timeline. So I import that into the program. And then Dacron Dan, same thing. He gives me a vocal track, a keyboard track, and then a camera mic with camera audio on there. Keep loading these tracks in as they come to me down Dropbox, WeTransfer. I'm taking all these assets and I'm putting them in one folder so I don't lose them. Take them out of the download folder immediately. Put them all in a single assets folder that you're going to work on with all the session assets because there's going to be a lot of them and it gets kind of messy. This is my assets folder for the We Lost Mama Pothole. You'll see I have a folder for each person. So I have Dan's footage, Dale's footage, Bruce, Rick, Todd, Antsy. Go to Todd. I have actually some stuff that's not used, random stuff, but there's Todd's, and there's Todd's bass track, and there's Todd's vocal track. Start a new session so you can see how it goes together. Boom. There's my folder with Todd's assets. So I'm going to put Todd's track up here, and you can see it populates the timeline. He sent me something really weird. He sent me a 5.1 audio track. We don't need these other tracks. We just need this one with the audio, and that's just going to be our guide track so I can see where he lines up to the other guys. It's probably one of the biggest tricks is just getting all the guys synchronized. And once you have them all together, you're in pretty good shape. And you can do a lot of that by audio if you keep the camera audio married to the video track as you put in the bits from the DAW. So there's those two. Now I'm going to take his bass part and I'm going to do Pothole vocal. There's all of Todd's parts. And you can see they're out of sync. You can just see it by looking at the waveform over here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the bass part with this other camera bass until it's just lined up so. I'm going to do the same thing with the vocal. I can see his vocal in the track there a little bit. And so I'm going to pull that over to there, line it up, and then I do an audio check to make sure I've got it how I want it. It's good to label these tracks so you can keep track of them. I'm going to lock them so they can't move. So I select all 4 of them, and I'm going to right-click and go to Switches, Lock. Now they're all locked. Actually, I should have done one thing first. I'm going to unlock everything, and I'm going to mute this track because we don't need the camera audio track. That's just the guide track. Now we're going to lock that together so it can't slip out of place. And actually, before I lock it, I'm going to slide it all over. So we go to our select tool, select all 4. I'm just going to slide it over because some of the other videos may be longer or shorter. Switches, lock. Now I'm going to do the same thing for Dan's footage. And so keyboard, Vox, keys. And whoops. There we go. Get this out of the way. There we go. Okay, so there's Dan. And now both these guys were nice enough to leave the count in there for me. That doesn't always happen. So I can actually use that 1, 2, 3, 4 to line these up. And so there we go. So that was really nice of Antsy to do a 1, 2, 3, 4 at the top of the tune. Now I'm going to take Dan's vocal, line that up, and Dan's keyboard track and line that up. And again, I'm just going to use the count off to line it up. If they don't give you the count off, sometimes you can use the downbeat of the song. Sometimes I use the last beat of the song. That almost always has everybody hitting on the same note. So that's a good place to synchronize. So I'm going to line that up there. And now Dan is in sync. And of course, I would be checking these by ear, but for the sake of this, I'm not checking them by ear. First, I'm going to mute camera mic, switch, mute. And then we're going to lock those. You may notice I still only see Todd on the screen. I want to see Dan. If I mute Todd, there's Dan. I can only see one of them at a time, unless I was to lower my composite level and see both at the same time, but that's a little hard to tell what's going on. I'm going to start to make my smaller frames. I'm going to go to this tool here. There we go. Video event effects. And so this frame represents Dan. I don't know why he's not in there. Normally you see him. This grid represents the main square. And you can see it's pretty convenient if you're doing 9 squares or 4 squares because you can just stretch it out to fit and use this grid to help you align. So I'm going to make sure to keep my aspect ratio, and I'm just going to stretch it out all the way so I have 9 frames and 16:9. And so you see Dan's in the middle. I'm going to zoom into a corner and just make sure I'm really on the money with this. So we zoom in with this tool here, the magnifying glass. Check your corner. See my corner's not perfect. Pink. There we go. It's 1 in, go 1 out. Right there. Okay, now it's right on the money. So now I'm going to move them to the upper left. And I just kind of picked where I wanted the guys based on how I was going to pan it and where they normally are on stage. I'm just going to drag this grid over to this corner. And then I'm going to zoom in and make sure he's, again, right on the money with that. Go back to the cursor and get that right on the money. I'm going to zoom in a little more. If you're slightly off over the course of all of them, it'll start to get goofy and you'll have to go in and clean it up later. So, and then when you're moving it, make sure not to use that arrow function because you're going to change the frame. You want to drag the whole group of the frame. There we go. So now we come back out and Dan is right there. Ta-da. Awesome. Now let's do the same for Todd. And you'll see it starts to go faster. You might be asking, how long did this video take you to put together? Probably 10 hours. There's no real easy way that I found. There's no format. Maybe there's something you can drag a bunch of files into and it kind of makes them look like that. I haven't found it. Everything I've researched from video editors says this is the way they do it. If you know something I don't about a quick and easy way to do it or a plugin application, let me know. And so we're going to move Todd. Here we go. Now we get him lined up in the corner there. We're going to zoom into that corner, zoom into that corner. Get him right on the money. Okay, and so there's two. And so we just keep going like that until everybody sends me their footage. I'll do another one to show you how quick the process can actually go when you're up to speed. There's me. Go to here. Go to here. Open that up to the corner. Zoom in on that. And then put that in there. There we go. And now I'm going to put me in the lower corner. And here we go. In the corner you go. We had 2 extra frames. So one we did the masked harmonica guy, which was kind of funny, and his fans got a kick out of that. The last extra frame, I thought it'd be cool to do kind of an old TV look. So I used a plugin to simulate a TV, and then I put the title of the song in there and name of the band. And you can see the whole dealio. Boom. And so we just keep going like that until we have all the footage lined up. We had a little back and forth for a couple of tracks about, hey, where should I put my solo? And so we'd talk through those. Okay, this is a good hole for the solo. And just some basic kind of music compositional coordination between the guys that a lot of times just happens when you're on stage, but we had to talk about it ahead of time. Since we had 3 guys taking small solos, I just told the guys, if you put your solo in the wrong place, I'll just move it to the correct place later and don't worry about it so it didn't gum up the works of the creation process. A lot of times you can fix stuff like that editing later, so I don't want the guys to worry about, oh, I played my solo in the wrong place. I mean, how would I do that? I basically clip that part of the video and that person's audio out. I'd move that over to the new spot and then put in the other spot that was replaced. And if it's all to a click track, it's going to line up really good. And even if it doesn't line up perfect, most people not going to notice. It's not about perfection. It's about representing and having continual content. And so that's our goal here. And I think the audiences are accepting of that and just really excited about the novelty of seeing their band playing and their favorite players. We had about 14 shows booked this summer. And so this is at least a way to give the fans something. I mean, bands like to entertain. And so this is another way you can entertain your people electronically and give them something that they might enjoy and keep them fired up about the next show and how great that's going to be. Let's look at all the assets on the timeline at the same time. You see it's many, many tracks. And that's because it's many, many pieces of video. So we've got 8 videos. And then this little fun video I put down at the bottom of static. The video pieces are all locked together so they can't slide around. You want to have to deal with synchronization after. And then I'm going to export all this audio now that I've got all the pieces to Pro Tools. And so to do that, I select the whole region and then I'm going to solo. There's a couple of different ways to do it. I don't want to have to resynchronize everything. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to solo an audio track. So like the harmonica here, the harp, it's soloed, you can see. And then I'm going to render as. And so I'm going to output that file. Even though I've already got the file sent from them and I could put that into Pro Tools, I want these files to now be in sync. And so I don't want an MP3. I'm going to select a wave. I want to keep these as high resolution wave files and not go to MP3, which is lower quality. So I like 24-bit 48K. So there we go, 24 PCM stereo. And I'm going to name this and put it in the correct place. So there it is. And so then I'm going to go through each of those files and do that over and over. So I turn off harp and I go to the original track and I'm going to render again. And so I'm going to render as, and each time now it comes up they'll all go to the same folder, which we want. Wave 2448. And this is going to be basic track. So there you go. And so it renders out. And so I render out each piece of audio that I'm going to need in Pro Tools. So that's going to be the tracks that the guys recorded specifically for the audio, not the camera mics, unless the camera mics were all that the artist gave me. So that in this case would be Spoons, the drummer, and Rick, the guitar player. And so a little bit about camera mics. If a guy has to use a camera mic, if that's all he's got, I'm okay with it. But what I suggest in Rick's case, he had an amplifier. So to get the frame shot, the camera mic is going to be a little farther away than we would normally mic up an instrument. So what I had Rick do was take his amplifier, instead of having it behind him where a guitar player would normally have it, I have him put his amplifier close to the camera. So he's getting a more direct sound with less of the room reflections into the recording. Now in the case of the drummer Spoons, he's playing a snare drum in a room. There's not much I can do about that. He sets the shot. I just work with that. The room signature was not bad. It was a little splashy. And a little bit of that in the mix is going to actually sound good and kind of give it a campy feel, but too much will start to sound unpro. There is a plugin from SPL called Deverb, and you can actually remove a little bit of the reverb tone out of that. That's a pretty advanced technique. We've exported all the WAV files for the video. In this case, it's going to be 11 tracks. And then I'm going to open those up in Pro Tools. So let's go to Pro Tools. We're going to go to Open Session. There it is. We lost Mama. It's on the system drive. Never put an audio session on the system drive unless it's a lockdown video and you're in a hurry. Okay, so here is my Pro Tools session. We have drums. There's some little drum fixes that I did because I didn't want his vocal in there. Shaker, bass. This is the guide track. Barry, harp. Here's the guitar. Here's the keys. And here's the vocals. I just like to work in Pro Tools because you can see I'm faster at doing the envelopes and I can do a lot more precision work. And I have my favorite plugins running in here. We're using a lot of Neve plugins from UA 1081. We got the 33609, PSP Vintage Warmer, which I like pretty good. I'm using EMT Plate Reverb, one of my favorite, EMT 250. So basically I just make a mix like I would mix a regular old Americana song or any kind of folk rock song. And once I had a mix that was pretty happening, I bounced it out. In fact, I use a different method than bouncing. I print it to an available bus track and then I export it from there. So I hit Command-Shift-K and I export the audio at 2448 and I send that to a folder and we're on our way. And so from there, I put it onto a USB stick and then I load it back onto the Vegas computer. It's kind of crazy having two different computers, but that's the way it works because one is primed for audio and my audio machine doesn't really go on the internet. It's too old to go on the internet at this point, but it's rock solid. So those are Macs. Now we're going back to Vegas. We're going back to the PC. So here we go. So now I've got my final mix here that I just dragged onto the timeline. That's what I love about Vegas. You can just drag stuff in. And now I just have to synchronize my mix back to the video footage. And so I just line it up against the original track. There we go. So we can see the count offs here. And I'm going to line up the count off right there. And look for the anomalies that match. Sometimes when you do a new mix, it doesn't quite look the same. So I try to find a very dynamic spike. And then, oh, I can see here I'm off a little bit. That's where we need to be. Pretty sure. Let's go check the end of the song. That's a really good place to check. A little bit off. So I'm going to line it up. There we go. That's where it needs to go. Okay, and we can verify that now. In the video preview with 9 frames of audio, you can't, it's very glitchy and it won't look smooth until you do the final render. So sometimes you have to do a render, see how it looks, make sure the sync is really good, and then maybe make some tiny adjustments. But the audio is now lined up and so from there, I have marked my in and my out point. I made kind of a funny outro here that the boys talked about, where we wanted to have each guy's name pop up at the end. We select the full length of the video, and with the way I do it is I select this blue bar, and I've already got markers at the beginning and the end. Delete that marker, and then I'm going to render it out. I'm going to go to render as. I'm going to go to MP4, and I'm going to actually go to 4K. And let's look at the settings for this render. So we're at 2160p, 29.9 frames per second, 48 million bits per second. I'm going to actually raise the average up to 28 million. Audio, I like to go 48K 512. Sometimes I go 96, but since this video is at 48, I'm just going to go 48. And then best, and hit OK, and you render it out. And once it's rendered, you can look at the final video, make sure it came out okay. Go to my renders folder here. I'm just going to play a little snippet of it just to show you. And I encourage you to go to Antsy McClain unhitched.com to watch the footage on YouTube. I'll put the link right here.
1, 2, 1, 2.
That's all I'm going to play you. You go watch it there. But it's really cool. I think it came out good. It's nice and campy. I'll play a little more of the video just so you can see. And so I use this lower frame just to be the funny TV set. Put some words in there. And it's just a good time. Fun to put together. You know, we could have done matching backgrounds. I know that's how a lot of the choirs do it. They'll set up a black background. But for this, we just wanted to get something out. You know, rock and roll is traditionally a little messier look. In hindsight, I'd probably have the guys do a little better lighting here and there. I think it came out really sweet for what it was. And it was really cool to see the responses from his fans. And then he actually took this audio and I sent him a final version that he just put on his lockdown surprise album release that just came out last week. So you might want to check that out too. So Dalesnale signing out. Thanks for stopping by. We'll be back with a regularly scheduled video next week. And thanks for listening.